Private members' business, notice number 2, Commonwealth funding to Queensland.
Call the member for Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I move the motion relating to Commonwealth funding to Queensland in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper.
The member for Ryan has the call.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm delighted to move this motion, and I'm pleased to see my Queensland colleagues, the member for Herbert, Mr Jones, who's in the chamber, and I note the member for Ford and the member for Capricornia are both listed to speak, because the facts are, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this coalition government is dealing with the legacy of debt deficit and fiscal disaster left to us by the former Labor-Greens alliance, who thought it was fine to borrow vast amounts of money with absolutely no plan for paying it back. But worse than that, they locked their borrowing plan in for years, hanging a millstone around the neck of future governments and generations of Australian children. In Queensland, the Newman government is also saddled with massive debt from nearly 20 years of Labor fiscal ineptitude, and now they face a prospect of a Palmer United Party-inspired Senate witch hunt backed by Labor and the Greens that will cost the taxpayers tens of thousands of dollars, continuing and demonstrating the fiscal irresponsibility of those three parties. Yet against this background, Madam Deputy Speaker, and contrary to the misinformation spread by the Labor opposition, the coalition is still able to provide $5.8 billion in funding to Queensland for various key projects. The coalition is the highest education funding government in history, as well as spending record amounts on infrastructure and giving my home state of Queensland funding for key projects. One of those, of course, is a massive $6.7 billion that has been committed to fix the Bruce Highway, to flood-proof it, so that in the cyclone season, towns, cities and producers are not cut off for days and weeks at a time. This is the government that sees problems and acts to fix them. The much-needed Second Range Crossing in Toowoomba will receive $1.3 billion, and this is a much-needed driver to improve access to the drive productivity increases in the agricultural sector in the rich farmlands west of Brisbane. The Gateway Motorway is also being funded with $1 billion for this neglected area of traffic congestion. Neglect and debt, a familiar tale in every state and territory which has had Labor leadership. And not just funding for infrastructure, Madam Deputy Speaker. Over the next 4 years, federal funding in health for Queenslanders will rise by 40% on 2013-14 levels. That's right, not a cut, but an increase of 40%. So much for the false Chicken Little complaints that we hear from the opposition and the Queensland Labor. This coalition government is actually increasing spending. The truth is indeed a bitter pill for Labor to swallow, that our government does more for health than they ever did. Education in Queensland will also get an extra 47% over the next 4 years. Yet somehow we hear constantly how the coalition has cut funding to education. And it's not just direct funding that has made a difference to Queensland. The axing of the carbon tax has saved Queensland taxpayers another $148 million. This ill-conceived and badly executed economy-wide tax on families and businesses is well gone, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is better to have an empty house than a bad tenant, as they say, and not one family in this country should be sad to see this bad tax repealed. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Abbott coalition government is the best friend Queensland has had in at least 7 years. Just imagine what we could have done if we had followed a competent government like the Howard government. See how much more we could have achieved. The fact is that the Abbott coalition government is delivering for the people of Australia and is delivering for my own home state of Queensland. And I'm delighted that my colleagues will be elaborating on those details. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I commend this motion to the House.
Is the